The following video is a product of the Blue Orchard Bee and the Charlotte Mason Institute, who hold a copyright. You are encouraged to share this file with your friends, family, and colleagues. Do not republish this information in any format, including electronic or digital, without permission from the Charlotte Mason Institute. Ideas suggested in these files do not necessarily reflect the views of the Blue Orchard Bee or the Charlotte Mason Institute. Information provided here is not to be perceived or construed as professional advice in matters of mental health. You are encouraged to work closely with a mental health professional provider that meets your needs.
We thank you for joining us for this series with reading specialist and Mason educator Donna Johnson. Let's listen to her experience and advice.
You ask what other things do caregivers and teachers need to keep in mind? Well, I think we've talked about these things. Just preserving the love of reading, whether it's hard or easy for them. Children should have access to stories. Comprehension is really important. There are, if you gave me a Spanish book right now, I know enough Spanish pronunciation that I could maybe read a couple sentences, but that would not mean I comprehend. And there are children like that are word callers that can learn phonics, but that doesn't mean that you comprehend. That's another thing to make sure of, and narration is a great way to learn if someone's comprehending something, but also just to discipline a mind to be listening and paying attention. And it is very important, though. We aren't talking actually much about what the science of reading tells you to do here. I'm going to in a little bit in a minute. But when you do decide to teach reading, you do need to follow the science of reading, starting with the phonemic awareness and then using structured literacy, and include some morphology and etymology right from the start, I think. I wish I would have done more of that. And you don't necessarily need a curriculum to do that. You also have to be careful not just to buy into a curriculum because it says it works for kids with dyslexia or it uses Orton Gillingham. You have to really do a little digging to make sure that a reading curriculum is following the science of reading and not just claiming to. I did make a list of the essential elements of multisensory teaching. I guess I'll just read through it. The International Dyslexia Association has 10 essential elements, 3 broad concepts. Your teaching should be multisensory, should be alphabetic, phonetic, and synthetic analytic. So looking at parts and looking at the whole. The instructional features of your lessons, it should be structured, sequential, cumulative, and repetitive. When it comes to the knowledge part, you should consider cognitive, diagnostic, meaning you know what they know and what they don't know, and you figure out what they don't know, and then prescriptive. And so then you prescribe what you figure out what to go on to next. And the nice thing about tutoring one-to-one that I do some of, it doesn't have to be the same for every child. And underlying all that, it needs to be emotionally sound. Because children that struggle, especially if they're in a group school, in a public school or any kind of group school, it doesn't take them long to decide that they're not very smart. And so they really you need to be real careful about that their little hearts and self-images aren't being hurt. Well, the last thing I have here, I looked at when I was doing some research. I found a blog by a woman who is a public school teacher, and she's one of those people that sells a lot of stuff on Teachers Pay Teachers reading materials. And on one of her posts, she said that her young son was going into kindergarten, or I can't remember if he was going to kindergarten or first grade, and she was just tempted to start teaching him a lot on her own. And she decided not to and just kept it in as games and activities and reading a lot of books. He loves stories. And then 2 years later, she posted that he had not learned to read. He was a struggling reader. And in that second one, and they also moved. And when they moved, she must have, if she was teaching, quit her job and decided to homeschool. But just from the second one, she calls it What Worked for Us. And I'm just going to read a little part of it. So she's now a homeschool mom who was a teacher, whose son is in second grade and still struggling to learn to read. She said there's not one magic thing that made the difference. It's been a combination of homeschooling, choosing the right reading program, and she mentioned one which I didn't write down, and I'm not going to because there's a lot of good ones, and you have to figure that out for yourself, I guess. Working daily, but for, she doesn't say here, but short periods of time. Using audiobooks because he loves stories, and developing a love of stories, and she was doing that well before she realized reading was going to be hard for him. We've come to realize that doing little bits of school each day work better for us than a longer amount of school time for fewer days. We often do school on Saturdays, school too. For us, it consists of about 20 to 40 minutes of reading activities, 20 minutes of math, and some social studies or science. Now, she didn't say anything about Charlotte Mason, but intuitively, her Mason's procedures and practices are so practical and intuitive that people come up with them if they're really considering what the needs of kids are. But I'm sure she's not a Charlotte Mason homeschooler. I don't think she would say. Keep in mind that at the time of writing this, we have a kindergartner, that would be her younger child, who is at or above level, and a second grader who's reading below grade level. At this point, I don't feel the need to do too much writing and grammar instruction beyond writing stories and some written reflections. So maybe we've got a little narrating going on there. I'm not sure. Next year, I plan to start some grammar with my oldest if his reading continues to progress in its current trajectory. Just a consistent short time for reading makes a huge difference, even during the summer. Last summer, we touched on phonics and reading daily. It helped maintain his reading level, and we didn't lose ground over the summer. One of the major things has been realizing who my son is and what he needs. Personhood, she's got that in here. He loves to learn, but not a traditional school type of learning. He loves to explore the world around him, go on adventures, make believe, tell stories, and have fun. I love that we have the opportunity to give him what he needs and support his academic development along the way. So she had to change a lot of things and slow things down for him. If he was still in what's a typical group school setting, he wouldn't be having much fun. And the children I know that have a more of a dyslexic brain also can do a lot of things that I can't. Yeah. So they have some skills too.
Oh yeah.
But they need to know that.
Yes. My son that is presumed dyslexic, his three-dimensional, spatial, just the way that he sees the world is just absolutely incredible.
And that's why a third of entrepreneurs in this country are dyslexic, because they can see things from a different way and figure out how it works to help other people or to come up with a product that helps other people. So yeah, each person's personhood is something to really know about for a teacher, but also for them to feel good about, because that's how God made them.
Yeah. And to know where they're being led, right? What is my place in the world? Like, I have a purpose here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's just no doubt that what American education is doing is wrong. And a lot of people realize that. I just don't know. I don't know how it'll change. I think that the science of reading is going to change reading instruction. I think, and I'm thinking that's going to stick this time. But I don't know about the starting school too early.
Mm-hmm. Do you think some of the disconnect there is that, the science of reading requires, as you mentioned, that it's not the same for every child, but then that means that you can't have a standardized test that's the same for every child, right?
Yeah, I wish. Well, the other thing is things do come and go. And I started my job at Dakota Wesleyan just when Common Core was starting up. And I don't think the state standards, they do still carry weight because the state tests are aligned to them. But I think good teachers are doing more what they know they need to be doing. But I don't know. I don't know if most principals still want to see a standard number on a lesson plan. I'm not sure. That the Common Core and the state testing has not disappeared fast enough, but I don't think it's completely gone anywhere, at least the state tests. So I don't know. Assessment is important, but you don't learn anything diagnostic from those state exams, and that's not the purpose. It gives some kind of overall picture, supposedly, of a school. The other thing I did learn, though, I taught the course on standards and assessment for a while, and I hated it when they gave that one to me. I loved it when they gave me children's literature, but I did come to like that class. And one thing the students did, I had them go look at our state report card and see how their school was doing. And they're like, I never knew you could do this. So I don't know how many parents are doing that either. But then they got interested, and then they were supposed to compare to another school. And then I didn't even realize this until one student brought it up. One year, they had there's lots of Native American reservations in South Dakota. And most of them have regular public schools, I think. But there's some that are under the BIA, what does that even mean? Bureau of Indian Affairs. And they don't have to report their scores or even give the tests. And I don't think private schools have to either, but they want people to see how they're doing when they're choosing schools.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Just as long as the young woman that I tutor that's in 8th grade, this was a year of, they have to do state tests every year between 3 and 8th grade, and she doesn't worry about it. She knows at this point that no one's evaluating her. She wants to try because that's part of teacher evaluation, but in South Dakota, it's not the whole thing. But they don't seem to be going away. Again, probably because somebody's making money.
Yeah.
Possibly. That's part of it, I suppose.
Yeah. One question for you. When one of the things that I heard you, talking about was in this partly in the history, but I think then continuing on as well, that even as the science of reading has come out, these other studies have come out, there's a certain disappointment when the study doesn't outright condemn whole language. But if the study is saying that systematic phonics instruction is necessary, does that automatically condemn whole language, or is there like gray areas where people have to be careful?
That's a good question, because that's what they're saying. Whole language, or the programs that I mentioned, Fontes and Pinnell and Lucy Calkins, they've just really been disproven. So has Mari Clay in reading recovery. And people come right out and say that. But when I don't know, when it's a national report, maybe it's people are supposed to draw their own conclusions. I'm not sure. When you write a 500-page report,
That report is actually pretty redundant. It's not even 500 pages, really. You could
Oh,
call it half. The
I was
actual like content of it, the structure of the report led to a lot of redundancy. So you could actually read like half of it and get everything out of it.
Well, apparently no reporters wanted to do that at first. But
I honestly, I think it's because their language focused on this is what to do, not this is what not to do.
yes, that makes sense.
But it just seems like if they specifically said, you know, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, if they specifically, is that the same as condemning it or a whole language, or is there some fine distinction that I don't understand? You know,
most parents wouldn't, well, most parents have never heard of this report, first of all, probably. Well, unless they pay attention to Emily Hanford, maybe. Although I don't know if she doesn't talk about it specifically. She talks
well,
about
I think that they've definitely heard of the science of reading, and I think that they are aware that there's a report out there that was done that supports this, right? That
yes, it's not coming out of nowhere. It's coming out of somewhere. It just took a while to for it to get enough. This is the first time that it's gone from a government report. I've never printed the whole other 500 pages. This one came out in a book, so I don't know if you can get that 2000, the latest one out is a print copy like that. But usually the researchers know about it. It usually doesn't get to schools of education, and it usually doesn't get to K-12 departments of education. And that's what's different now. And maybe it is because there's enough evidence that it can't be just a fad and it's going to disappear again if we wait long enough. There's just too much evidence and too much research now. And brain scans.
Yeah. I think that fMRIs make a big difference, and just that kind of research, like parents are aware of that kind of research now, right? And people are aware of it, whereas maybe for a long time they didn't really pay attention maybe to, you know, neurological research and psychological research and stuff very much.
No. And
it's almost part of our common language now, though.
Right? It seems to be now. It really does, more so. But on the other hand, there's a lot of children who don't have a parent that pays any attention or cares about them. The last couple people I talked to that are first-year teachers and asked how many parents came to parent-teacher conferences. In South Dakota, it's a lot of little towns, and most people at least show up for that. But there's still a lot of families that struggle with different things for different reasons and don't have a lot of options. Mm-hmm. So, but for those kids, if they're going to a public school, the science of reading can make a big difference for them if it's taught the way it should be.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all of your time. I know that, you know, a lot of time went into this before today as well.